A little bit of background on me. I studied interior design at university and then sort of fell into lighting design from there, and I've been doing lighting design now for about 9 years, architectural based. So I worked on some really good projects, everything from like commercial offices to residential projects, hotels, bars, restaurants, a wide variety in external lighting as well. So it's been quite a good experience so far, so hopefully, I know there's lots of different design backgrounds in here, but I'm hoping that what I show you today just inspires a few people to sort of think about lighting design as a profession. So, moving forward, just a little bit on the content of the presentation. I know I've got only an hour near enough to do this, so I'll probably be rushing through it, but basically just want to discuss what lighting design is, focus on artificial lighting, what we can do with that. So we look at what lighting does to perception, mood, the illusion, interaction with lighting, light colour, light source types. So it's just a kind of a broad overview of lighting design, artificial lighting design. Then I'll focus on natural lighting as well, because that's a big part of what we do. So hopefully I'll be able to get through it in time, but fingers crossed. So what is lighting design? So we have artificial lighting. Artificial lighting is basically electrical lighting, what you get inside. Anything which is powered. So that's probably the key thing we usually deal with on projects. Then you've got natural lighting as well, which is a big part of what we do as well. Especially when it comes to designing for schools and offices and hospitals, natural lighting is very important, especially in the sort of recovery process, and you get a lot of benefits from natural lighting, so we'll talk about that later on. So artificial lighting, it's quite a subjective matter in terms of everyone's opinion on lighting is different. So when you walk into a space, you all view the space differently. Some people, it can go down to mood, it can make you feel in a certain way, but that's all individual to the person. So that's quite good when you're working with lighting design, because you don't quite know how people are going to react to it. So it's quite interesting to see how people react when they enter spaces. Mood. This is quite important, especially when you're designing for certain applications. So, say for example, if this was an office space, that wouldn't be the right kind of lighting design for the office space, because it's not really practical from a lighting point of view and a functionality point of view. However, as a restaurant and bar, that's the kind of space you want to be walking into, and something which is quite important about mood and lighting, and not everyone understands this, is that light and shadow are just as important as one another, and that sort of creates a rhythm in the space, creates the mood, and just putting pools of light where they need to be in a space, that's really important, and it all sort of enhances the overall experience you get when you go into a space. Once again, just talking about the mood and colour temperature, which we'll get onto later on, just working with different colours and just changing the lighting effect in the same space can create a different impression of the space. So that's really important and something to consider. I mean, obviously when we talk about films and things like that, lighting is, really important in films, especially when you look at scenes like this, the people in silhouette, people in shadow, just the dark and where the light hits them and things like that, that's quite important in getting the whole overall sort of impression of what you're trying to achieve and that mood. There's just another example of having like the person in the shadow in the front, so you can't quite see them, but in the background you've got that backdrop of light, and it just all enhances that scene. And then this is obviously an image out of Avatar as well, that quite sensual lighting, and it sort of fits with that environment and what that moment, and that's really important. Architecturally as well, it's just working with lighting details, not floodlight in a space, especially for a quiet. I mean, this is an actual church, So, you know, you can picture yourself walking into there and, you know, it's quiet and it's got that sort of feeling of a special place. And then once again, this is a lighting installation by a Japanese light artist. But, you know, it just, you know, when you enter that space, it's really important. It's all about the lighting more than anything else. So I've mentioned illusion. You know, you can do things with light which create illusions within a space. And, you know, that's very important, especially when you're working with lighting details, creating shadow gaps, where you've got lighting at low levels, so it makes things look like they're floating. For example, this is an installation by a light artist called James Turrell, an American light artist, and some of his work he's been doing since the 1960s, and it's still so relevant today. But it's just beautiful, and the whole idea is playing with light and space, you know, playing with people's perceptions and depth, and that's all to do with the lighting. This is just a couple more images. This one is by a light artist group in London called UVA, United Visual Artists, and they work with lasers, which is another, you know, element which we can work with. It's not so much in the architectural side of things, probably more the sort of artistic, you know, applications. But they've done some really cool stuff, which, you know, plays with space and mood and everything. It sort of encompasses lighting design and what you can achieve. And this was another one of their installations, which was actually for a fashion show. And they actually had a lighting show before the fashion show started, and that's the actual walkway there. But, you know, they've played with perception and obviously using smoke with this as well, just to cut through the actual atmosphere and create almost like so it's creating walls of light which don't actually exist. So, you know, these are sort of really cool things you can do with lighting design. And then this one is one of my favourites. I'm not actually sure who's actually done this, but in terms of an installation, they've managed to somehow bend light, which is beyond what I could tell you with regards to my lighting knowledge. But it's all to do with how they push light through objects and refract light through glass and things like that, and it actually bends the light. So they've created almost like an archway of light which people can pass through. Interaction. This is something which is becoming more prominent in the industry, especially from an architectural point of view. Traditionally, it's done by individual light artists, but now we're starting to sort of get into this side of things as well, because our clients are asking us to look at ways in which they can encourage people to come into their buildings. They want to attract people to the lighting design. And these are the examples I'm going to show you at the moment. You know, it's about how the light reacts to people in the space, and as people pass through a space. I mean, this one, for instance, as people walk through the tunnel, the light actually follows them. So, you know, you're creating movement with light. It's not just a static effect; it's actually moving and it's interacting with the environment. And that's, you know, that's something which is more prominent these days, and it's becoming more regular. And these are just a couple more examples. This one's quite a nice example of it's an actual tunnel, and it's sort of, they've got these reeds of lights either side of the tunnel, and as you pass, the lights dim up and down, so it's quite a nice space to be in. And before, when I said you've got that crossover with architectural lighting, this is a subway in London, and what they've done, they've created almost like a lighting feature wall on the opposite side of the track. And as people stand on the other side, the lights dim up and down to almost reflect their shadows in that space. So it's constantly moving with the people there, and it just creates a completely different environment. This is another quite a cool installation. This is actually mixing audio and lighting as a combined sort of two elements. And that's something else which, you know, we as a lighting designer have sort of been getting into more often, and we've done a couple of installations which should be finished next year. And it's all about how light and sound are, you know, come into one and mix together, and you could create some quite cool sort of installations with that. And similar to the one which I showed you before, this was an installation in London, and it's actually just a handrail, and it's got LEDs integrated into the actual handrail itself, so as people walk past it, the lights change colour and dim up and down. So it's not just a sort of static space, it's, you know, it's creating a bit more visual interest for the people who walk past. So how do we do it? So I'm just going to go on to the light source types we use. I appreciate I'm going quite fast here, but if you've got any questions, you can just ask me at the end. So anyway, the light source types. So basically, I wanted to show you the kind of fittings which we use to create the spaces. You know, we do, and you know, from a lighting point of view, reflector luminaires are probably something which you'll be aware of. Maybe when I don't say it like that, but this traditionally is down lights, where you've actually got a light in the ceiling which has a reflector and pushes light directly downwards. It's also spotlights, so where we've got track mounted spotlights at high level actually directing light onto a wall, and we use this for museums and things like that to spotlight objects. I mean, in terms of the actual lamps I've highlighted here, we've got compact fluorescents, which are the sort of energy saving lights which you traditionally have at home, where they've got like the funny shape to them. Metal halide, that's just another source of lamp. Tungsten and halogen, those are the little lights which always pop in your house, and you always keep on changing them, and they're really not energy efficient, and they're trying to actually phase them out. And then we move on to LED. But I've just got an example of a fitting here, which is sort of bread and butter in terms of what we use for lighting, and this is what we call an LED spotlight, and it's quite good because this fitting itself actually has an adjustable beam angle, so that basically narrows the beam of light or widens it. So if we're trying to spotlight a piece of artwork, we can spot it quite sharply, or we can extend the beam of light to give more of a wash lighting effect. And you know, it's quite handy having a tool like that, especially for museums and retail environments where, you know, things are changing, and you know, the installations are changing, and you want to direct the lights and have a flexible solution. Fluorescent lighting, unlike the sort of directional reflector luminaires, fluorescent lighting gives probably more of what we call a diffused lighting effect. So when I say a diffused lighting effect, it's like a softer sort of glow of light. So say for example a fluorescent, you all know fluorescence, you can see it's just giving off light everywhere, and it's not very, it's quite a soft lighting effect, whereas with a reflector you're pushing light in a certain direction, it's quite a sharp beam of light. So we use these for certain installations, particularly in office spaces and things like that. Obviously not coloured fluorescents, but they're the type of fittings we use because it gives a wider beam and a more uniform distribution of light. And as you can see from this image here, this is a light artist called Dan Flavin, and he's been around since the 1960s, and a lot of his installations use fluorescent battens, and it's a very sort of cost-effective and simple solution, but you can create some really nice lighting effects. But it's obviously very soft, and it's a sort of an ambient glow rather than sharp beams of light and directional lighting. LED lighting, that's something you've probably heard of, and it's becoming more evident now as we move into the, you know, future. And it's basically LED lighting is, I'm just going to get, I'll use some of these. LED lighting, you can't really see it from here, but effectively what we call is like a little profile, and on this little profile we have little individual LEDs. So effectively what we've done, we've created a smaller light source, but we're actually getting more light out of it, and that's becoming more evident now when we use LED lighting a lot of the time. It's not appropriate for all installations, but that's the sort of direction we're going in. It's basically because it lasts a lot longer and you get more light out of it, and that's why we're sort of starting to phase out things like little halogen bulbs which blow in your kitchen and things like that. We don't want them anymore, so we sort of move into the LED, and I'll go on to more of that in a minute. So light, colour. Like showed with the damp flavouring, light colour. We can use light colour in all different aspects, and particularly with the fluorescent lighting, all we use is colour sleeves which go over the fluorescent bulb itself, and that creates the colour we want. LED lighting, we've got RGB, which is red, green and blue, and basically that mixes different colours together to create a spectrum of colours, so we can illuminate buildings, to change the colours, and we can do all different things with that. One thing I will sort of go on to though is white lighting, and this is quite important and probably something which you don't really focus on or don't know too much about, but when we approach an installation we have to white light is actually measured by a colour temperature. And to give you an idea of that, I've just put this little chart here. So say for example at the top we've got 9,000, so that's saying that's light from a blue sky, so that's a really sort of blue light. And then we go down to a sunset, so we light down at 1500 Kelvin, and that's the colour temperature spectrum of white light. Traditionally we only work, particularly with the installations we use, we work from like 4,000 to 3,000, but that difference in colour temperature makes a big difference to the atmosphere you're trying to create. And say for example, if you're in boots or something like that, it's got quite a clinical feel, and that's to do with the colour temperature of the light. It's quite a white, clean blue light, so that probably would be around 4,000 lux. Whereas if you go into a restaurant or your actual home, you're talking about like getting down to colour temperatures like 2,700, like it's a warmer colour temperature which gives you a more domestic and homely feel. So it's quite important when you're designing for certain applications like offices. You always go for a cooler colour temperature, whereas if you're looking at hotels or retail where you want it to be quite a sort of a warm and inviting atmosphere, you go for a warmer colour temperature. And that was just an image to show you the different grades of light and how that changes. So I've just put a couple of sides. Can anyone have a guess like sort of what colour temperature we are there? Anyone? No? Well, we probably, it's obviously a very, very warm colour temperature. And I'd probably say, it's not something we traditionally work with, but you're getting below the 3,000 Kelvin there, so it's creating a really warm lighting effect. Whereas if you go into this installation, you can automatically see the difference between warm to very cool lighting, and that's quite a clear indication of the differences and the feeling you get from that. And then you get something which is sort of in between, and the sort of going down to the finer margins there. You never really go to in between, but you're that sort of mid-level 3.5K. Colour temperature. So in fact, while we're on the colour temperature, just to give you an idea, I've got a little sample here of LED. So let's put that on there. And this is quite a good example of the different colour temperatures and how you see the light. So you might not all be able to see it here, but you've obviously got a very cool white colour temperature here, and then a warmer white here. And that's, like I said before, very important when you're doing different installations, particularly when you're working with residential projects and retail projects, and it's whether you want to go for a clinical feel or a warm and I'd probably say more domesticated kind of feeling with the light. So just a conclusion on the artificial lighting. We've talked about perception, so how lighting can, create a different feeling. It can play with perceptions, it can play with mood and atmosphere. You can create illusions by, creating different depths and layering the lighting within a space. An interaction which, is something which is important. You want the lighting to react with the people and, the people and the environment. That's quite important and something which you should always sort of think about. We looked at the light source type, so reflector lamps, where we're talking about pushing light in a certain direction, like spotlights, downlights. We have fluorescent lighting, so we're diffusing the lights, creating a sort of a warmer, more of an ambient glow within the space. And then we've got LED lighting, which is a sort of a finer point source, which is quite directional as well. And then we talked about light colour, so coloured lighting, obviously getting onto colour temperatures and how that can make you feel, and what's appropriate for the actual environment you're designing to. So I'm just going to show you some stuff about natural lighting as well. And natural lighting is just as important as artificial lighting. And, particularly with a space like this, if we stayed in this space for so long, we'd probably all end up falling asleep. And that's probably because we've not got any actual natural lighting in the actual space. And, that's important because it has a well-being effect on you as well. It's not just about having a view outside, it's actually, you're absorbing that light and it's actually affecting you. And, moving forward, especially in hospitals and things like that, there's been evidence that natural lighting, if you've got access to natural lighting, that can help the healing process, makes you feel better, makes you repair quicker. And this has all been studied, and it's really important to acknowledge it. But at the same time, natural lighting doesn't need to be boring. You can do some very cool stuff and create some really nice environments with natural lighting, and that's important as well. Play with natural light and see what you can do. And I mean, this is quite a good example of diffused lighting. So above these actual roof lights, what we have here is, these are the roof lights, and then we've got diffused panels which diffuse the light into the space. And the reason why that's important is because this is a museum, and sunlight can actually damage the objects and art pieces in a space, because it's it's UV. It's just like your skin. After a certain period of time, it's going to degrade the objects within the space. So especially when designing natural lighting in museums and things like that, it's really important you acknowledge that and address it. And I think that this is also quite a good example of showing diffused light, whereas if we go back, that's like a really sort of sharp directional light, and obviously the sun's coming through, and we're not going to get that with that other space because these panels are actually diffusing the light and they're softening the light. This is, I think this is in Germany, which is also another museum, and it's a bit like the Teletubby world, but effectively these circles integrated into the grass are actually roof lights, so the space directly below it's sort of peppered with all these roof lights, and it's a sort of really beautiful installation to be on the outside as well as the inside. And we don't really see many things like this, so it was a really good project to show. And historically as well, natural lighting's been hugely important, especially when we come to churches and things like that, buildings which have been around for thousands of years. Natural lighting was the only way they could really light these spaces, so it was really important. And when you think about churches and the stained glass windows and how sunlight sort of comes through them and plays with the colours on the actual surfaces inside the church itself, that's really important. And we still apply, those sort of solutions, we're still using them in this day and age. And it just shows the importance of natural light, and it doesn't have to be boring. It's just all about creating really nice spaces and maximising the effect of natural light. So I've sort of picked up on it before, but the benefits of natural light. Once again, it sort of gives you that connection with the outside world, and that's really important. It's not just about providing it just for the sake of providing it. You want people to be in a space where they can connect with the outside world. I mean, if you're looking at your laptop or PC for so long, it starts to really put strain on you. You need something to break away. You need a long distance view. You need to be looking outside, because it also gives you a connection with the outside world, and that's important for your body clock as well. So you're continually linked with the outside world. And these are just a couple of nice images. I thought this is quite a nice image at the bottom here, and not just having one big window, but making that into lots of little small windows so people at different heights can look through. And it just creates a really sort of interesting environment. And this is just another example. I mean, if you picture yourself sat in that space internally, and all those walls are solid, you just wouldn't have that connection with the outside space. Architecture is about linking both the internal and external, and that applies to lighting, and you want that philosophy to sort of flow through the building. I know not all buildings are like this, but that it's quite important to acknowledge. So the benefits of natural lighting to us. It's quite a complex thing to talk about, and I'll try and do it in as simply as I can. But effectively, as the sun rises and sun sets, that affects your internal body clock. And at midday, that's when you're meant to be at your most sort of alertness. In the morning, obviously, you're sort of waking up and you're sort of gradually sort of warming up to the day. But at midday, that's when you're sort of meant to be at your peak in terms of output and alertness. And there's a reason for that as well. And when we go back to the colour temperature, and I talked about the really sort of cool 9,000 K colour temperature from a blue sky, that actually affects you physically. And that's at the highest point of the day. That's when you sort of get that colour temperature, whereas you've got the morning and sunset, it's a very warmer colour temperature, and that's either setting you to wake up slowly or actually set you to fall to sleep. So the fact that when it goes night and you want to go to sleep, that's all linked to lighting and how that affects your body and your internal body clock. And this is just an example of how it works here. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but as an overview, that's it. It's important. So obviously sustainability is a big part of what we do as well, and I think everyone is aware of being sustainable, and we're all trying to save energy, and this has been going around for a long time from a lighting point of view. And the reason why is from when we're designing offices and spaces of that nature, obviously they're on 24/7 near enough, they're on during the day. And what we want to maximise the natural lighting within the space so we can reduce the energy consumption of artificial lighting. And I thought this was quite a good example of showing that. So if we just try to imagine now that if we do lighting calculations, and this basically focuses on how much daylight we're actually drawing into the building. And when we're designing lighting solutions, we design control systems which automatically control the artificial lighting within a space. So effectively what we'd have is daylight sensors, and the daylight sensors would be integrated into the actual ceiling, and they would measure the amount of light we get within that certain area. And say, for example, we've got lots of natural lighting in that space, that will automatically dim down the artificial lighting. So effectively, we're not relying on someone turning the lights on and off. We're actually automatically controlling the lighting within the building. And you know, for big, huge office buildings, the amount of energy they can save from using installations like this is, you know, it's hugely important. And you know, it's part of the standard which we need to achieve. It doesn't apply to all installations. Say, for example, retail, sometimes it doesn't work with that, or hospitality, so restaurants and bars, you know, that they're generally about the lighting, and generally it's about the evening experience. But the buildings we use during the days, like commercial offices, hospitals and things like that, it's just about trying to maximise the natural lighting we get in the building, and then use that to offset the actual artificial lighting and electric we use. So it's hugely important. So designing with natural light. Once again, this is it. I'm going to give you a quite high-level overview of this, but obviously, geographically, everyone's positioned in certain places across the globe, and the sun, as it passes around the world, that has effects on artificial lighting. And as in the architecture profession, we have to design buildings around natural lighting and way sunlight comes in. And it's important because sunlight can cause overheating in a building, so they call that solar gain. And you know, that can be quite dangerous really, and it's not desired. So we have to think about ways in which we can bring natural lighting into the building, but balance that in a practical and functional way. And I thought this was quite a good detailed section drawing to show, you know, ways in which we can draw light into a building. And obviously we've got the central atria. So where we've got the basement level, you think about these guys here, they're not going to have much access to natural lighting, and the reason why is because they're underground. So sorry. What we need to do is try and draw as much of the natural light from the atria itself into those spaces. And it's not all just about measuring the actual amount of natural light, it's about just giving someone access to seeing, oh yeah, there's natural light there, and that gives you that connection with the outside world. And you can see people positioned here, obviously they can't see directly outside, but they can see that it's daytime because the natural light's been drawn in through the atria itself down into that space. There's other ways. To the right hand side, you'll see where the blue arrows bounce up to the top of the window and then bounce back into the back of the space. That's important for classrooms, because what we try and do is, obviously, when people are sat directly adjacent to the windows, there's going to be lots of natural light there, whereas like the poor kids at the back of the classroom might not be getting as much natural lighting. So the idea now is that we're trying to develop lighting solutions which draw natural light into the back of those spaces, so you're giving a more balanced, what we call a uniform lighting solution. And you know, that's really important as well. No matter where you sat in that space, you want to try and maximise that natural lighting effect. And the idea there is that we can actually, even with sunlight, bounce light off a surface back into a space and then back down a space. So you know, it's once light hits a wall, it doesn't just hit the wall and absorb and doesn't go anywhere else. We can actually bounce light, and that's important. And obviously, when we talk about internal surfaces and colours of internal surfaces, I mean, this space is quite a good example of you know, creating quite a dark space due to the colour, the materials we've used and the colours within it. And you'll see that the lighting, actually, the darker the colour, the more it absorbs the light. Whereas this space, if this space was painted white, that'd have a massive impact on the sort of ambient and perception of the space as well. So, you know, materials are really important when we're designing with natural lighting, because we can use that to bounce light and draw light into the building. So yeah, it's just an example of what we do. And then, as I picked up before, natural lighting doesn't have to be just a simple window in a wall. You know, we can do lots of different things with it, and these are just a couple of examples of installations where the actual facade of the building, the makeup of that facade is the actual, that's pretty much the window itself. It's absorbing and letting the light through, and it's completely built up of natural lighting, and you know, it creates a really nice atmosphere in the space. And this was another example. It's not the best image, if I'm brutally honest, but when we talk about natural lighting, we can have north-facing roof lights, and what that does is that basically maximises the natural lighting we receive from the north. And what happens is the sun comes from the south, and that directs light into the building, but that can have issues with solar gain. So generally what we do when we're designing buildings is that most of the glazing is on the north side of the building, and that's because it's maximising the natural lighting, but we're not affecting the solar gain the building receives from the harsh and strong sunlight. So installations like this are quite important, showing how the roof lights work. And then this was just another example of having a facade which, you know, it's not just a boring facade. They've actually made the effort to do something a bit different, and it's having that internal external connection and using, you know, coloured glass with the sunlight to create effects internally as well. So it's quite a playful way of utilising natural light, and once again, it's quite important. And then you can go really sort of technical with this. So when I was talking about solar gain, this actual facade works with solar gain. So these, they're almost like apertures on a camera, where you sort of get the lens and the actual go smaller to larger, and that works with the natural lighting the building receives. That's quite an unusual but very high-tech installation for natural lighting. And then this was another light artist who, he also works with artificial lighting, but he also creates spaces with natural lighting. And just thought it was a really sort of nice project to show you. I mean, you can see the top left-hand image. It's actually positioned, I think it's a bank, it's positioned on top of the building. And it's basically a 360-degree panoramic walk around the building, but it's all with coloured glass, so it creates these sort of really nice environments, a bit different and a bit more unusual, but you know, I think a good example of what you can do with natural lighting. So just a bit of a conclusion. Obviously I've showed you some natural light inspiration. You know, it's important, it's not just artificial lighting we use, we work with natural lighting, and that doesn't need to be dumbed down or, you know, be any way boring. That can be just as special as artificial lighting, and we can create some really amazing spaces. Benefits of natural lighting, obviously we talked about the healing process and how it makes you more alert at certain times of the day, and that's to do with the colour temperature and your physical body clock, and that's all to do with natural light. Energy savings from utilising natural lighting. Obviously the buildings we use are becoming more smarter and more sustainable, and that's to do with control systems which maximise natural lighting and use that to offset the artificial lighting and the energy we use within the buildings. And then obviously developing architecture around natural lighting, so you can play with the facade details, think about how the sunlight comes into the space and what you can do, creating shadows and things like that. And that was just picked up on the actual fenestration design as well. So That's pretty much question time, and I know I've gone through it really quickly. Usually, I think last time I did it took about 3 hours, but I've just about sped through that.
So do please ask questions if you have any, and Andrew and both have got microphones for you too.
Superb. Home time.
What, on a personal level, what interests you about light? Why does it captivate you enough to work?
I think, I started off life doing interior design, and I sort of fell into lighting through that because I loved the way it completely changed the space. You know, even from just a simple box with 4 walls, you know, that could be the plainest and sort of dumbed down space ever, but if you throw lighting into there, you can create something completely different and completely transform the space. And I just think it was a very sort of, for me, it sort of attracted me to it. It was like quite a cool and vibrant industry I wanted to head in that direction for, but it was just all to do with the ways like we've picked up on here, like you can create illusions and completely change the sort of mood and atmosphere just by messing around with the lighting. And that's all it started off with. It was just me messing around with lighting. It was just when I was working with Trevor at university, and you know, doing 3D visualizing and just throwing lighting into that and seeing how it reacts with a space, and that's what really attracted me to the industry.
So where does your work come from?
Sorry?
What is the process of you getting a job?
Well, I mean, there's sort of several different ways, really. I work for an engineering consultancy, and within that consultancy, we have our specialist lighting design group, which I'm part of, and we get work internally. So we have partners within the business who have clients which they've had for years and years, and they'll come to us and we'll have to bid for the work. So that's just part of the sort of process we go for. So we have internal work come through to us from people high up in the business who have key contacts, like developers, property developers, you know, key people like that, and contractors. Or we have, you know, people who come externally directly to us. So we get calls from architects, interior designers, you know, people who are just looking to enhance the lighting design for what their project. And then we have direct clients. Say, for example, we've just picked up some work for the Lowry in Manchester. The client actually requested that they want lighting designers on the project because it's such a specialist installation, and they want it to be very sort of unique to that space. And it's, you know, you need people who understand lighting. So there's all different avenues, you know, that you come from in terms of bringing work in. But they're the sort of key ones we use.
I've got a question about the relationship between, or the influence of, you've shown quite a lot of sort of artistic practitioners. How does that sort of influence the commercial work you do, or the other way around? And do you do any work you would consider personal? Personal? Yeah, you know, into non-commercial.
Yeah, I mean, it's an example of that is we do get involved with doing sort of light art installations ourselves, and we call one of the ones which we've done recently was a subliminal event which we hosted in Manchester, and that effectively where we got sponsorship from a lighting manufacturer, and we went into the John Rylands library and we created a light and sound installation. That's just something we did off our own backs. Another thing which I've done in the past is what we call guerrilla lighting, and we've done that in Manchester a few times, and that's where we get a group of students or clients and we actually go out on the streets with big torches like that and colour filters, and we'll pick buildings to light up. So we'll go around on the night and we'll pick sort of 4 or 5 locations, and we'll actually light the buildings. And that was something we did off our own backs to promote lighting design as a profession.
How do you record that?
Usually done through you know, photographs, and then we market them. You know, it's all different avenues, social.
Social network.
Yeah. But you know, that's every year. I mean, say for example next year is the International Year of Light, and I'm going to try and organise something locally in Stockport as well, but that's sort of under discussion at the moment. So, you know, it's, you know, you've got to get up and do these things at the end of the day, you know, but that's where I think the passion comes from. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Okay, last question from anyone?
I was interested in the bit when you were talking about solar gain.
Yes.
Solar gain. What sort of process or strategies are used to avoid that? Because we work in a building that is really quite schizophrenic with regard to solar.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly warm.
Yeah.
Certain times of the day, and then incredibly cold.
Yeah. I think you find that like older buildings like this. I mean, even when I was
Is that to do with what I'm driving at here? Is that to do with inadequacies in the architecture? Is it to do with a fault in the planning?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say it's to do with the architecture, and I think there's probably ways you can combat that. But fundamentally, even, you know, in this day and age now, the building is orientated in such a way that it's designed around how natural light enters the building and solar gain. And, you know, buildings like this where it's pretty much it's symmetrical in terms of you've got a strip of windows on either side of the building, or going all the way down. You're obviously getting sunlight on one side and north, I don't know if it's north facing, but north facing light potentially on the other side. So you're always going to have you're always going to be absorbing more heat on the south side of the building. But in terms of ways you combat that, I mean, we use, say for example, louver systems, which, you know, actually sort of, it just restricts the amount of natural, well, direct sunlight which comes into the building. So we're talking about vertical louvers, horizontal louvers, which you see on buildings and things like that. And then also these different ways where you can, the fenestration of the system, the actual facade system as well. It doesn't have to be louvers, it can be sort of laser cut panels where lighting's actually coming through still, but it's just restricting the amount of solar glare. But it also it's quite complex. It's about the glazing, the types of glazing you use as well. So each glass manufacturer has a certain, what we call the U value, which basically restricts the amount of light transmittance through the glass itself. So say for example, if we had a building like this on the north facing side of the building, you'd have quite high light transmittance, so you'd be maximising the lighting, but you wouldn't have to worry about sunlight coming through, so you wouldn't get an overheating issue. Whereas on the south side, you'd potentially specify a glass which had a higher value but a lower light transmittance, so it's restricting the amount of solar glare coming into the building, which is creating that build-up of heat.
It's interesting. I think the architects of our building nodded off during that lesson.
Yeah.
All right. Round of applause for Luke.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hopefully you all found that interesting. I think it was applicable to every discipline in the room, really, so hopefully it's pulled some strings with you. The next lecture, I'm pretty sure, is a chap called John L. Walters, who's the editor of iMagazine. He commissions daily photographers, illustrators, works with graphic designers, but also I was thinking in terms of the interior design students, he'll quite often do features on architectural spaces that involve design. He's a massive bigwig in terms of the creative industry, so we're really looking forward to having him next month, so join us for that as well. But thanks.